Hey everybody, this is Christopher Setterlund. On this YouTube channel, I've made hundreds and hundreds of videos, a lot of them dealing with New England and Cape Cod history and travel. But you may have noticed over the last year, 2 years, the majority of videos have dealt with the In My Footsteps podcast that I host. A lot of full episode audio and segments from the podcast. I have said repeatedly to anybody who will listen that anyone can make a podcast. So I figured I would share how I created mine for any of those looking for inspiration or who are thinking about starting their own podcast. I've enjoyed writing since I was young. Right before I was a teenager, I started creating my own radio shows with friends. And then as a teenager, I wrote skits. I bought my own camcorder because I thought at times maybe I could be a film producer. I loved humor, history, even some research. The rise of podcasts over the last decade led me to thinking, hey, why not me? Also, it was a distraction to keep me from drinking. When it comes to podcasting, first, think about what you'd like to talk about. It can be anything, really. But the main point is whatever you speak about, you should be passionate about and hopefully somewhat knowledgeable about. And it should be something you could see yourself talking about for hundreds of episodes. I couldn't choose one subject, so instead I took the buffet approach. That was, I piled everything that I liked onto my plate and said, well, I'll make this work. Okay, so you have your subject material. Now you need a name and a catchy logo. I chose In My Footsteps because I'd already used it for a travel blog and some travel books, so I figured it had a little name recognition. I'm a novice when it comes to graphic design, so my attempt at a logo was something that a kindergartner would probably make. I asked my friends Amy and Barry, who are much more skilled at this, and their ideas were way better. Now you might want to just jump right into recording, but before you do that, make sure to do some research. Research your topic to make sure that you have enough material for at least 10 or more episodes so you can hit the ground running. The last thing you want is to have a great first episode and then have no follow-up. Also research the nuts and bolts, like hosting platforms, a little details like your show's category, how long you want it to be, how frequent you want to release an episode. Sure, you can think on the fly, but it's better to have all of that stuff figured out before hitting the record button for the first time. The more podcasting stuff you learn on your own will benefit you as you get further into your show. I'm not saying don't ask for help or advice, but just be wary of how much influence you give others on the show that you want to create. The nuts and bolts of my podcast, I use a Samson Q2U microphone. The recording software I use is called Audacity, and my hosting platform is Buzzsprout. Those all work great for me, but you might find others work better for you. For me, I looked for the perfect combination, good and affordable. Most podcasters don't start their show with a huge budget. Once I was all set with that minutia, I started doing shows every 2 weeks. Even though it's a buffet of topics, I still try to keep that buffet organized. My shows tend to be 50 to 55 minutes, which seem to be a common length based around much of my podcast research. But when you're recording your first show, don't cut it off because you think it should be a certain length, and don't pad it with fluff if you're trying to reach a certain number. Just record, and when it's done, it's done. Once you've recorded your first show, then you get the greatest joy of all, the joy of editing. Even if you don't have a big budget, like me, you can at least sound professional. The big things to look to get rid of when you're editing are long drawn-out pauses, any ums and ahs, any other weird noises that might come out of your mouth while recording, or background noise that's not meant to be part of the podcast. I have learned to love and rely on the compressor and normalization on Audacity, which will help to even out your vocals so they don't get too high or too low. I don't do many interviews on my podcast, so I have to carry the show with my own content. But I try to keep a certain layout for the show. That includes having specific music for certain show segments so that listeners have kind of an idea what's coming. Your passion for your subject or subjects should come across on your show. If you care about what you're speaking about, your audience will care, and vice versa. Believe me, there's an audience for any subject. Once you've officially launched your show, the big key is to be consistent with your content. I launch on Wednesdays at 5 a.m., so pick a time, pick a frequency, and stick to it. You want to become destination listening for your audience. A big key is to make sure whichever schedule you set for yourself, make sure it's manageable. A lot of podcasts are gung-ho, they start hot, and then they fade away quickly. After finding a hosting platform, whether that's Buzzsprout or others, you should look to get your show on all of the major podcasting platforms. This will assure the maximum amount of eyes and ears on your product. Although at first it might seem fun to sit back and watch your downloads increase like an old school website hit count, you have other things to focus on, that being marketing and promoting. This includes social media posts, sound bites, teases, and overall trying to interact with your listeners. Learn what people like and adapt to it. This will help your show gain listeners. Remember, there is no bigger advocate for your show than you. Granted, you'll have family and friends who will help do their part to promote you, but nobody should promote your work more than you. And when it comes to promotion, promote your podcast everywhere you can. Leave no stone unturned. Keep things simple at first. While lining up big-name guests, getting major advertisers, and dreaming of your first 1 million downloads is all well and good, keep your focus on episode 2, 3, etc., and making a quality product that you are proud of. A good, engaging product, properly promoted, will bring all of those accolades you're looking for. In the end, the main thing to remember is to have fun. If you enjoy what you're doing, the number of downloads and comments you get won't matter as much. So hopefully I've inspired you to start your own podcast if you were thinking about it. If you have more questions, you can always send me a message. And if you have no desire to start a podcast, you can always tune into mine.